everybody. My name is Trevor Dearing and I'm the Director of Technology for Illumio for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And it is with great pleasure that I want to welcome Help AG as our partner in the Middle East and Africa region. I've worked with Help AG for many years, and they are not only one of the best partners in the region, but actually one of the best partners that I've worked with on a worldwide basis. And it's especially good to welcome someone who I've known for many, many years, who I now consider as a reasonable friend, Mr. Nicolai Solling. So, Illumio are one of the leaders in micro-segmentation, but I really want to sort of delve into how this market developed. I mean, we sort of go way back and work together on network segmentation and things like this. So it'd be good to get your view of how we got from there to where we are now with workload segmentation.
Yeah, so I think first of all, the purpose has always stayed the same, right? So we've always, from a security perspective, wanted to isolate our workloads. And there's a lot of reasons why you want to do that. Lateral movement becomes much more difficult for attackers. You also have a very good way on the infrastructure to be able to enforce a form of access control. And, all of these things are good ambitions to have in organizations. And when I started out in this space, right, it was typically because we finally got the horsepower and the firewalls and the network components to be able to create segmentation. So, those of you who are as old as me and has been working with network infrastructure for as long as I have, you'll remember VLANs and ISL and .1Q and all of these different kind of things, which were kind of allowing us to create virtual networks in our infrastructures. What was key back then, and actually has been a challenge ever since, was the fact that it's not only about how do you segment the hosts and how do you segment the workloads, but how do you get the right policies to be implemented between those VLANs. And, moving from VLANs, we moved up towards more software-defined networking, where we still had this concept of security zones and we still had this concept of segmentation, but instead of us using VLANs for it, we started to use the infrastructure to define those kind of boundaries between our hosts. But the fundamental issue, which was to understand what was communicating where and why, was still relatively unsolved. And that's where, if we look at what we're doing today with solutions, Illumio is a very, very good example of that, right? Where we take that capability and move that into software, and then really also focus on solving the other issue, which is actually answering the question, why is stuff communicating to each other and what is communicating to each other? And that's a major step forward, right? And I, personally, I believe that apart from being much, much easier to deploy in the infrastructure, the ability of being able to visualize what communicates where is actually probably the biggest strength of a solution like this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember trying to use VLANs for separating traffic, and originally we did that for building broadcast domains and trying to control the volume of traffic on each segment. And then obviously security came into that, but I can't even remember what year it was when everyone discovered that VLANs weren't a good security option, and that we had to start using other types of technologies like firewalls and things like this. And we were putting the concept of, I think it was the one-armed firewall onto the edge of a data center fabric to do the segmentation. That was all part of the throughput and things. I mean, things have sort of, I think things have definitely moved on, not only in the firewall world because of the better performance in the switch world. So we now have these sort of very high performance spine and leaf networks that allow us to sort of not worry about the traffic so much. So, there's a lot of, and you mentioned several ways to segment. You spoke about SDNs and we spoke about firewalls, and the thing that we sort of see are really, around some of the challenges of actually operationalizing that. So, I mean, you've probably been involved with a number of customers around the issues of trying to scale and develop data centers and hybrid clouds. So is that something that really has changed in very recent years?
Yeah. So first of all customers and organizations, they're really thinking about how do they deliver their applications as code today, or their infrastructure as code. And obviously, the less variables you get in that, the better, right? And assigning IP addresses and getting the intelligence to figure out which IP address do you assign to which server because of which reason, that's really, really challenging. So this whole thing about creating segments within your infrastructure is actually extremely unfriendly to automation. You just want to assign a machine to a segment, get an IP address potentially from DHCP or any other kind of automation for IP assignment, and then from there on, you kind of just want to go. And that's where being able to enforce the access control for the infrastructure, for the network communication going into the server, doing that on that specific host is actually very, very interesting. So it's also a great enabler of being able to do this in an easier way. If you also put in then the explosion of where your workloads might be running, cloud, on-prem, potentially even a hybrid between the two, or you have multiple data centers on-prem, right? Enforcing these kind of capabilities in your network infrastructure becomes really, really challenging. And that's where I think, again, the solution delivers a very practical approach to it can be a very complex question to answer.
So why? I mean, there's obviously different ways to solve the problem of how to segment and how to micro-segment. Why was Illumio an attractive solution for you?
Well, first of all, if you we've been doing micro-segmentation for a long period of time, right? So as I mentioned, from firewalls to how did we do it in the SDX fabric or network fabric and these kind of things. The problem you have is that you kind of used up all of the energy and all of the appetite for doing segmentation before you even got going, because you still hadn't understood what kind of traffic was. You spent so much time on trying to make the communication and plumbing to work to make sure that the traffic gets intercepted by the correct security devices, where the reason why Illumio is so attractive is because it's such an easy deployment on the agents, and the way that we can utilize the telemetry we can pull in from the agents to also then illuminate the communication flows between those servers. It just makes it so much easier and so much more attractive for clients, because they get value from day one, right? And that's really where I've been in so many projects where the security team on one side would say, well, we really need micro-segmentation, we really need to segment our servers and these things. And the network team would say, well, that's fine, but we just need to roll in our SDX fabric, and we have a plan with our networking vendor to do that. And it ended up becoming a long project, something that could be achieved relatively simple with the right kind of technology.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. What we've seen very recently is where organizations try to achieve micro-segmentation with, I guess, more traditional solutions and sort of fail and reverse out, and then look for a solution like Illumio to actually solve that. And it is, I think, down to just the speed at which you can deploy that and how easy it is. It's almost, people talk about the firewall being dead, and I don't believe that for a second. But I think just trying to the difficulty with firewalls is trying to manage all the rules, and if we can make that simple, then that just speeds things up, incredibly. And I know that's something we're looking to do at Illumio.
Yeah, I actually believe that the combination of the two solutions, right? So doing it in the network, or doing security in the network for those flows, as well as being able to combine it with something like Illumio is really interesting. And the reason why is that you still want to maybe look for threats. You still want to have your IPS systems and your anti-malware systems and all of these things that the great network firewalls of the world can deliver for us, right? But at the end of the day, you also have something very, very simple and practical, which is that you want to make sure that two hosts that are not supposed to communicate to each other should not be communicating, right? And that's where you probably want to do that at the lowest bar of entry, right? So that it can be as easy as possible. And then you want to make sure that those big different security segments within your infrastructure where you really require that extra level of inspection, that you combine the two capabilities. And that's what we see with clients for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right when you're spot on when you talk about the low bar, because the last thing you want to do is to start to try and do things like IPS in the middle of your data center infrastructure. I mean that's a function that is really specialist and needs to sit on a firewall and have the best in class type functions. With that, thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge and experience. And I hope to actually be able to physically see you and come and visit you later in the year and get away from the snow. And,
you're always welcome.
Thank you very much. All right.